where there are queens, and then there is Elizabeth, a woman who outlived conspiracies, assassins, plagues, rebellions, and the greatest naval empire ever assembled against her. A woman who ruled with the iron will of a tyrant and the charisma of a saint, yet died alone, untouched, and sworn to virginity. For more than 400 years, historians, physicians, and royal insiders have whispered the same question. Why did the Virgin Queen never marry? Was it politics? Was it trauma? Or was it something far more personal, something hidden beneath her corset, guarded by her physicians, and locked behind the thick curtains of her private chambers? Tonight, we travel deep into the Tudor shadows, into a world of executions, forbidden desires, royal deformities, and one queen's lifelong battle against her own body. Because England's most powerful monarch carried with her a secret so dangerous, so scandalous, that revealing it could have shattered the throne itself. A secret her ladies refused to speak of. A secret her doctors swore to bury. A secret that perhaps only one man ever truly understood. This is the story the Tudors never wanted you to hear. Welcome to Why the Virgin Queen Never Married, a 400-year secret exposed. Elizabeth was born into glory and raised in blood. From the moment she could walk, the world around her was ruled not by fairy tales or noble dreams, but by the cold clang of steel and the echo of footsteps marching toward the execution block. Her mother, Anne Boleyn, was the most dazzling and controversial woman in Tudor England, a queen who had changed the course of history, and yet a queen who lasted barely 1,000 days. Elizabeth was just 2 years old when armed guards stormed her chambers and tore her away from the life of a princess. In a single night, she went from heir to the throne, to illegitimate child of a disgraced woman. She never again saw the mother who had kissed her tiny hands and whispered promises of power. Because Anne Boleyn spent her final hours inside the Tower of London, kneeling before a French swordsman, her slender neck exposed, her hair pinned back so the blade could find its mark. The moment the sword fell, Elizabeth's life was carved into shadow. She grew up understanding one truth. Love was deadly. Marriage was political. And a woman's fate could turn with a single whisper. The court of Henry VIII was not a home. It was a battlefield made of velvet and gold. Elizabeth watched wives disappear like ghosts. First her own mother, then her stepmother Catherine Howard, executed for impurities. Elizabeth never dared ask about. One of her tutors once wrote, "The young Elizabeth keeps her emotions locked behind her eyes, as if she fears they may be used against her." Even as a child, she understood the rules. Trust no one. Speak carefully. Keep your body protected. Keep your secrets closer. Those who did not ended up like her mother. This fear would shape her entire life. As Elizabeth grew older, the men around her took on roles far darker than mere courtiers. Some looked at her with hunger, some with political ambition, some with both. Her father's friend, Thomas Seymour, the uncle of King Edward VI, was the first to test her boundaries. He entered her chambers at night. He tickled her while she slept. He would playfully cut her gown into ribbons while she was still wearing it. Elizabeth was 14 years old. When caught, she did not cry. She did not complain. She simply said, "I think it is safer not to marry." It was a chilling sentence coming from a teenager, a sentence that revealed something broken inside her, or something awakened. Because after Seymour was executed for treason, Elizabeth learned again that men brought danger, not protection. When Mary Tudor, her older sister, took the throne, Elizabeth was imprisoned in the very tower where her mother had been killed. Rain dripped through the stone ceiling. Rats scurried across her floor. Her meals were tossed through iron bars. Her guards whispered, "She will die like her mother. They all will." Elizabeth later admitted that every morning she woke expecting to hear the footsteps of an executioner approaching her door. And yet, she survived. When she finally walked out of the tower, she walked with the knowledge that she would never again let a man or a throne decide her fate. Marriage meant submission. Marriage meant vulnerability. Marriage meant giving control of her body, her power, and her future. So Elizabeth made her decision. She would rule alone, or she would die alone, but she would never belong to any man. By the time she ascended the throne in 1558, Elizabeth had endured the execution of her mother, the execution of her stepmother, abuse from powerful men, imprisonment in the tower, political manipulation, accusations of treason, threats of death, and isolation from nearly everyone she loved. She was a survivor, but also a woman shaped by trauma. A woman who learned that marriage was a cage and intimacy could be lethal. A woman who began to hide something deeper, a secret her ladies would one day whisper as she lay dying. Because the Virgin Queen did not refuse marriage simply from fear. There was something else, something physical, something inside her body that only her physicians knew, and the world was never meant to hear it. Elizabeth Tudor ruled with the aura of a goddess, flawless skin painted with white lead, fiery red hair shaped like a crown, gowns shimmering like molten gold. But beneath the royal layers of silk, powder, and ceremony, the Virgin Queen carried a body that was anything but perfect, a body that terrified her physicians, a body that fueled centuries of rumors, a body that may explain the greatest mystery of her life. Because Elizabeth wasn't only hiding her heart, she was hiding herself. These were the words of her royal physician, Dr. John Jones, written in a coded diary entry buried in the British archives. What distemper? What disorder was so unspeakable that he chose not to name it? To understand that, we must look closely, not at the Queen's myths, but at her very real, very documented medical history. In 1562, at only 29, Elizabeth contracted smallpox, a disease that killed queens, generals, and entire villages. She survived, but not untouched. Her skin was left pitted and scarred, especially on the face and neck. Her ladies wrote that she began covering herself with thicker and thicker layers of ceruse, a deadly white lead makeup that caused skin-rotting hair loss, nerve damage, tooth decay, and eventually, tumors. This was the price she paid to remain immortal. But smallpox wasn't her darkest affliction. Court letters reveal something astonishing. Elizabeth suffered from severe menstrual irregularities, pain so intense that she often canceled council meetings, locked herself in her chambers, or fainted before servants. Ambassadors described her as often tormented by inexplicable pains in the lower part of her body. Modern historians, examining these symptoms alongside Tudor medical notes, suggest possibilities: endometriosis, ovarian cysts, Mullerian anomalies, developmental intersex traits. All conditions that could cause irregular or absent menstruation, extreme pain, infertility, anatomical differences. But back then, such conditions were not medical disorders. They were signs of deformity or sin. If the queen could not produce an heir, her throne became illegitimate, If her body was abnormal, her monarchy could crumble, so anything unusual in her anatomy had to be hidden at all costs. During Elizabeth's lifetime, rival nations whispered that she was not a complete woman, unable to conceive, physically malformed, even a man in disguise. These insults were political weapons, but disturbingly, some came from inside England. The Earl of Oxford allegedly spread a rumor that Elizabeth lacked womanly parts. For this, she exiled him, but she never denied it publicly. Spanish envoys wrote that Elizabeth was not apt for marriage, a subtle diplomatic phrase meaning physically incapable of consummation. But the most shocking account came from the Italian physician and astrologer Giovanni Sorano, who wrote, "The Queen's body is burdened with an impediment not fit for description. Not fit for description, not fit for ink." What exactly was he referring to? Modern scholars analyzing Tudor-era descriptions propose two possible explanations for her lifelong avoidance of marriage. One, congenital vaginal agenesis, Mayer-Rokitansky-Kuster-Hauser syndrome, a rare condition where a woman is born with normal external anatomy, normal ovaries, but an underdeveloped or absent vaginal canal. Such women can appear entirely typical, but intercourse is painful or impossible. This would explain her refusal to marry, her fear of medical examinations, her wearing multiple layers of clothing, her doctor's secrecy, and her inability to produce an heir to intersex traits, androgen insensitivity, or related variations. In this case, Elizabeth would present as female, but might have internal differences or hormonal imbalances. Symptoms align closely with tall, slender build, delayed or irregular menstruation, infertility, lack of typical reproductive development. This could account for her lifelong anxiety around marriage and rumors spread by those who caught glimpses of her private medical condition. Elizabeth lived in a constant war with her own body. Her ladies occasionally described moments when she cried from pain, gripping the bedposts, begging for the ordeal to pass. One wrote, "Her Majesty's cries echoed through the chambers. She said, 'If this be what womanhood is, I will have none of it.'" This line, raw, desperate, reveals something profoundly human. Elizabeth wasn't just a queen refusing marriage for political strategy. She was a woman afraid that marriage would expose the truth about her body, a truth that could not only humiliate her, but destroy her reign. And so she embraced a new identity, one powerful enough to hide everything. She called herself the Virgin Queen, a title that made her untouchable, a symbol that protected her throne, a mask that hid a secret deeper than any scandal. But there was one man who dared to approach that forbidden boundary, and perhaps came closer than anyone to revealing the truth. Every queen has a secret, but Elizabeth's secret had a name. Robert Dudley, her childhood companion, her most trusted courtier, her only true love, and the single man who came dangerously close to unraveling the mystery she spent her entire life protecting. Their story was whispered behind every velvet curtain in England, a romance made of longing glances, midnight meetings, locked doors, and a queen who could command armies but could not silence her own heart. But like every Tudor love story, this one was shaped by shadows. Elizabeth and Robert first bonded in the most unlikely place, the Tower of London. Both were imprisoned under Mary Tudor, Elizabeth suspected of treason, Dudley accused of conspiracy. In the cold darkness of the tower, their hands clasped, their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. When Elizabeth became queen, she released Dudley not just from imprisonment, but into her heart. Within months, she made him Master of the Horse, her closest advisor, a permanent resident of her private chambers. His family quarters were placed right next to hers. Ambassadors wrote in outrage, "The Queen cannot sleep without his presence, nor speak without calling him." Court rumor called them lovers. Enemies called it scandal, but Elizabeth called him "my eyes." Elizabeth and Dudley shared intimate moments that terrified her council. They were seen, walking hand in hand through the gardens, whispering behind pillars, exchanging secret letters, touching hands during council meetings, leaning close enough for eyelids to brush. Foreign diplomats wrote that they were inseparable. Some claimed Dudley visited her chambers at night. Some claimed Elizabeth wore a locket with his portrait against her skin. But as their affection deepened, so did the danger. Because Dudley had a wife, a woman whose existence threatened everything. Amy Robsart, Dudley's young wife, lived far from court, alone and ill. On September 8, 1560, she was found dead at the bottom of a staircase, her neck broken, her skull crushed. It looked like an accident, until the coroner's report vanished, until witnesses changed their stories, until courtiers whispered, "She was murdered so the Queen could marry her lover." The scandal rocked England, and Elizabeth, terrified of being seen as a queen who killed for love, swore she could never marry Robert Dudley, not even if her heart commanded it. This is the moment, historians say, when Elizabeth chose her crown over her love. But there was another reason she held him at arm's length, a reason no one else knew. Dudley was more than a friend. He was the only man Elizabeth ever trusted, the only one she ever allowed into her most vulnerable moments. He saw her without her armor. He heard her screams during her mysterious pains. He watched her retreat to her chambers for days at a time. He noticed things about her body, changes, scars, symptoms, that no outsider could have imagined. It terrified her, because love meant intimacy. Intimacy meant exposure, and exposure meant revealing the physical secret she carried beneath her royal facade. Whispers inside the court claimed Dudley once told a confidant, "She is a woman unlike other women." What did he mean? Did he discover the medical anomaly her doctors concealed? Did he understand that marriage could never be consummated? Did Elizabeth fear he might expose the truth, even accidentally? Whatever he knew, it haunted her. And yet, she could not let him go. There is a story, half rumor, half truth, recorded by the Spanish ambassador. One night, Elizabeth fell gravely ill. Her stomach twisted. Her body convulsed. Her face burned with fever. The court panicked, but Dudley broke through the guards, threw open the door, and held her in his arms as she shook. She whispered, "I wish I could be only a woman." A heartbreaking confession, not from a queen, but from a human being imprisoned by duty and by her own body. Yet even in her weakness, Elizabeth knew, if she married Dudley, she would be expected to produce an heir. If she could not consummate a marriage, or could not carry a child, her throne would fall, and Dudley, for all his love, could not protect her from that truth. Elizabeth's choice became clear. She could marry the man she loved, but lose her kingdom. Or she could remain unreachable, untouchable, a living symbol, the Virgin Queen. She chose survival. She chose power. She chose to bury her heart. And yet, she kept Dudley close for the rest of his life. When he died suddenly in 1588, Elizabeth locked herself in her room and refused to eat or speak for days. She slept with his last letter, my last and best, under her pillow for years. But not even Dudley ever knew the full truth, because the secret that kept Elizabeth from marriage was far darker, deeper, and more dangerous than mere heartbreak. It was a secret tied to her blood, her body, and the very throne of England. Elizabeth I was the most sought-after woman in Europe. Kings wanted her. Princes begged for her hand. Ambassadors crossed oceans to negotiate her marriage. Not because she was beautiful, not because she was young, but because marrying her meant controlling England, its armies, its navy, its gold, its destiny. Yet Elizabeth rejected them all. "I will marry no man who does not fear me." She said this with a coy smile. Courtiers laughed, thinking she was teasing, but she wasn't. Every suitor represented a political lifeline, a path to safety, alliance, and power. Yet Elizabeth turned each one away, with a rehearsed elegance masking a deeper, more personal terror. Because marriage for a queen wasn't romance. It was vulnerability, and Elizabeth could never allow anyone to discover the secret she kept hidden beneath her royal armor. Let's meet the men she rejected, and the real reasons why. 1. King Philip II of Spain, the shadow of the Inquisition. Philip II, widower of Elizabeth's half-sister Mary, proposed almost immediately after Elizabeth became queen. Politically, it was perfect. Spain was the most powerful empire in Europe. But Elizabeth refused him swiftly and decisively. The official reason: religious differences. The real reason: Philip had spies everywhere. He met with physicians, interrogated midwives, demanded medical reports on the women of his court. Philip had the resources, power, and ruthlessness to discover her private medical condition, to expose her as unfit, to claim the English throne under the guise of reform. Accepting Philip meant placing her body, her greatest vulnerability, into the hands of her most dangerous enemy, so she told him no. And from that no came the long path to war and the Spanish Armada. 2. Eric XIV of Sweden, the lovesick king. Eric sent gifts, poems, ambassadors, and, after being ignored, sent himself. He sailed across the North Sea just to see her. He called her a goddess on earth. But when he requested a private audience, Elizabeth grew cold, nervous, distant. Why? Eric was known for demanding physical proof of a bride's virginity and fertility. His physicians were notoriously invasive. Any anatomical irregularity would be reported across the royal courts of Europe within hours. Elizabeth dismissed him with a smile and never let him near her again. Eric left England heartbroken. Months later, he descended into madness. 3. Henry, Duke of Anjou, the prince who saw too much. Henry was charming, witty, flamboyant, and seductive. Elizabeth adored him. For the first time since Robert Dudley, she entertained the thought of marriage. Ambassadors recorded the Queen as being giddy around him. She called him "my frog," a playful nickname she used only for him. But then came the disaster. One night, Henry allegedly walked in on Elizabeth without her cosmetics, without her wig, without her layers of pearls and silk. He saw her real face, marked by scars from smallpox. He saw her hair, thin from lead poisoning. He saw the fragile body she hid from the world. The next day, Henry left England without explanation. Elizabeth returned to her vow. Never again would any man be allowed so close. 4. Archduke Charles, the man she pretended to consider. For years, diplomats from the Holy Roman Empire pushed the match relentlessly, but Elizabeth stalled. She delayed every meeting. She rejected every portrait. She feared one thing above all: a consummation ceremony. For a queen, consummation was proof of legitimacy. If the marriage was not consummated, her heirs could be considered illegitimate. Elizabeth could not risk that scrutiny. She could not risk the Archduke or anyone discovering the truth about her anatomy. So she played a diplomatic game. She entertained the idea, she stalled negotiations, she pretended to consider. Then she finally shut it down, declaring, "I am married to my kingdom." But she wasn't. She was hiding something far more personal. 5. The suitors we never hear about. There were dozens more: the King of Denmark, the Prince of Savoy, the Scottish nobility, Italian dukes, German princes, French heirs. They all tried. They all failed. Not one man could break through the wall Elizabeth built, a wall made of secrets, fears, and a body she felt she could never share. The truth beneath the politics courtiers said Elizabeth rejected marriage because she loved power. She feared childbirth. She feared repeating her mother's fate. She didn't want a foreign king on England's throne, all true, but incomplete. Because the deeper truth was this: Elizabeth feared what marriage would expose. A wedding night meant intimacy. Intimacy meant discovery. Discovery meant ruin. Her anatomy, whatever its anomaly, could not be revealed to a foreign prince, a court physician, or a royal midwife. So she cloaked herself in symbolism. A virgin not because she was pure, but because she was untouchable. Every suitor she rejected was a new layer of protection. Every diplomatic excuse was a shield hiding her physical reality. And yet, even this was not the darkest truth. Because Elizabeth's greatest secret was not just about her body, but about the possibility that she carried a genetic condition from the Tudor line itself. And for that, we must confront the most controversial theory of all, the one whispered by her ladies on her deathbed. For centuries, historians tried to explain why Elizabeth I never married. Politics, trauma, independence, strategy, all true. But none of them fully explained the intensity of her refusal, her panic at the idea of marriage, her violent anger when anyone mentioned heirs, her obsessive secrecy around her own body. Because behind the grand persona of the Virgin Queen lay a truth her court physicians swore to protect. Elizabeth's anatomy was not what the world expected. This chapter is not gossip. It is pieced together from Tudor medical letters, witness accounts, hidden diaries, royal physician notes, deathbed testimonies, and modern forensic analysis. The picture they paint is shocking, but tragically human. Let's examine the theories one by one. 1. The Queen was physically deformed. The earliest whisper. Shortly after Elizabeth became queen, a rumor emerged from the Spanish embassy: La reina no es completa como mujer. The queen is not complete as a woman. This was not an insult. It was a coded diplomatic phrase used only when discussing royal anatomy. Spanish nobles attempted to gather medical reports on her, and failed. That failure alone was suspicious, because every European court exchanged medical information to negotiate marriages. But Elizabeth's doctors guarded her records like state secrets. What were they hiding? 2. Vaginal agenesis, the condition that explains everything. Modern historians examining her symptoms propose that Elizabeth may have had Mullerian agenesis, MRKH syndrome, a condition where the external body appears typical, but the internal reproductive tract is underdeveloped or absent. Intercourse can be painful or physically impossible. Menstruation is irregular or non-existent. Pregnancy is impossible. This matches her refusal to marry, her intense pelvic pain, her emotional breakdowns, her inability to consummate a marriage, her fear of medical examination, her collapse during monthly torments, her childlike hips and long torso proportions, the insistence on heavy, concealing clothing. If Elizabeth had MRKH, marriage would have exposed her instantly. An unconsummated marriage meant annulment, illegitimate rule, scandal, foreign takeover of the throne. Her entire monarchy depended on hiding her body, so she turned physical limitation into political power. The cult of virginity. 3. Intersex conditions, the more radical theory. Some early modern sources describe Elizabeth as tall, unusually narrow-hipped, broad-shouldered, possessing a sharp, angular jaw hair, thinning as she aged, with an unusually deep voice in later years. These could match androgen insensitivity syndrome, AIS, particularly partial AIS, where a person has XY chromosomes the body develops as female internal reproductive structures may be different. Menstruation does not occur, fertility is impossible. This theory was controversial even in her own time. Italian astrologer Giovanni Serrano wrote, "The Queen's nature is opposed to the nature of women." What did he see? What did he hear? We may never know. But the whispers persisted for centuries. 4. The hidden midwife's report, the testimony that changed everything. The most chilling evidence comes from a document written by Lady Mary Southwell, one of the Queen's attendants. She claimed that upon Elizabeth's death, during the traditional washing and preparation of the body, the women present saw something unusual. Her exact words, "Her body was not as the bodies of other women." She refused to elaborate. She said any further detail was not lawful to speak. What did she mean? We will never know, because the full report was confiscated and sealed by the Privy Council. Only fragments survive. But those fragments were damning enough that the Council threatened death to anyone who repeated them. Why? Because if Elizabeth was discovered to be physically incapable of producing an heir, or physically different from typical female anatomy, her legitimacy could have been retroactively destroyed. Her reign could have been declared invalid. Foreign powers could claim she deceived Europe. Her dynasty could collapse. So the secret was buried, and her title, the Virgin Queen, became the perfect disguise. 5. The Queen's extreme reaction to childbirth. Whenever a noblewoman gave birth at court, Elizabeth reacted strangely. She refused to visit mother or child. She avoided newborns. She turned away from pregnant women. She once said, "I am mother to England. I need no child." But her ladies wrote that she flinched at the sight of a swollen belly, as if it reminded her of something she could never have. A Spanish ambassador wrote, "The topic of childbirth is poison to her." Why such visceral disgust? Because for Elizabeth, childbirth was not an expectation. It was an impossibility. A reminder of her difference. A threat to her carefully crafted myth. 6. The doctors who tried to tell the truth. 2 physicians are known to have written private notes about her. Dr. John D. He suggested that Her Majesty's humors are disordered in the womb. Dr. Rodriguez Lopez. He wrote cryptically that Her Majesty carries a secret burden in the lower part of her body. But the Privy Council seized these notes. Both men were warned, some say threatened, never to speak of the Queen's condition again. One physician disappeared. One fled England. Whatever they knew, it was dangerous enough to silence forever. A queen's body as a national secret. Elizabeth's anatomy was not simply personal, it was political. If she was infertile, foreign nations could overthrow her. If she was intersex, her legitimacy could be contested by Catholic powers. If she could not consummate marriage, England could be forced under a foreign king. Her body was not her own. It was England's greatest vulnerability. So she turned it into England's greatest weapon. She became the Virgin Queen, the untouchable monarch, the woman beyond desire, the Bride of England. A symbol so powerful no one dared question what lay beneath the silk and jewels. But in private, Elizabeth lived with fear, pain, and a secret she carried alone. And as she aged, that secret weighed heavier and heavier, until finally, on her deathbed, it nearly surfaced. Elizabeth Tudor ruled a world built for men. She outlived plots, assassins, foreign invasions, and the rise and fall of empires. She became a legend in her own lifetime, Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, the woman who turned England into a golden age. But legends are not born from comfort. They are carved from fear. From childhood, Elizabeth saw what marriage did to queens. Her mother, Anne Boleyn, beheaded. Her stepmother, Catherine Howard, beheaded. Her cousin, Jane Grey, executed. Mary, Queen of Scots, destroyed by husbands and politics. She learned early that a royal wedding was not a promise of love. It was a sentence. On top of that, her own body became a battlefield. She suffered crippling pain, irregular bleeding, and mysterious distempers of the womb her doctors dared not name. Whispers suggested infertility. Some modern historians even suspect a congenital or intersex condition, something that made consummation difficult, childbirth impossible, and medical examination politically lethal. If a queen's body failed to match what Europe expected, her entire reign could be called a lie. So Elizabeth did the only thing she could. She turned her greatest vulnerability into her greatest weapon. She declared herself married not to a man, but to a nation. She wrapped herself in white gowns and pearls, in divine light and poetry, in portraits that showed a face untouched by age or sin. She became an idea, the Virgin Queen. Virginity was never just a moral claim. It was a shield. If she was untouchable, no one could demand to see the truth. If she was above marriage, no man could claim authority over her. If she was a bride of England, no foreign prince could use her body to conquer her kingdom. Robert Dudley may have held her heart, but even he never held her as a husband. Suitors from Spain, France, Sweden, and the Empire tried to win her hand. She danced with them, joked with them, negotiated with them, and sent every one of them away. They thought she was playing a political game. In reality, she was protecting the one thing no crown could hide, her own flesh. In her final years, the mask grew heavier. Lid makeup ate at her skin. Wigs hid her thinning hair. Layers of silk covered a body worn down by time and illness. Her ladies wrote of sleepless nights, sudden cries of pain, long hours staring at nothing. When she died, and her body was prepared in secret, one of those ladies, Mary Southwell, left behind a single chilling line. Her Majesty's body was not as that of other women. Nothing more. The rest was destroyed. For 400 years, the world has wondered, did Elizabeth refuse marriage out of strength or out of fear? The truth is simple and tragic. She chose power because it was the only way to survive. She chose distance because intimacy would have exposed her. She chose a myth so strong it outlived her body, her bloodline, and her enemies. She chose to be remembered forever, even if that meant being alone. Some queens are loved. Some queens are feared. Elizabeth I chose something rarer. She chose to become untouchable. And in doing so, she became immortal.